The book is called From Triggered to Tranquil. And what prompted me to write this book is I see so many people, friends and clients, who criticize themselves, who beat up on themselves when they feel frustrated, angry, upset. In other words, when they get triggered and they kind of maybe even lose it a little bit or shut down and can't cope, but they get so critical of themselves. And I have discovered with all my work with clients that these trigger reactions, these upsets that just flare up sometimes like a knee-jerk thing, they are really the doorway to deeper healing and deeper self-compassion if we know how to work with them. So I want to make the world a more compassionate place. And I think self-compassion is the first step.
I've had people say, people say to me, "Oh, you're this or that, and like you're strong in this area," and then they think that you never hurt. So then no one asks you if you're okay. They kind of, and that's equally as kind of, I don't know what the word is, equally as upsetting, maybe.
It can be triggering.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Even if you are relatively casual about slights, emotional slights, you realize, well, that kind of thing happens. Those kind of people, we can accept ourselves, but sometimes we get triggered because I'm kind of one of those people. I come across pretty together, and so a person won't ask me how I'm doing, or a person won't, like, take the trouble to invite me to something or to invite me to share my feelings. They figure, well, if Susan wants to come, she'll show up. If she wants to stay, she'll express. And so, but people like us, like my type, is what's called the avoidant attachment. And I talk about attachment styles in the book. And that really is a kind of dimension of sensitivity, your attachment style. So there's the more preoccupied, attached person who's quite often just looking, does the other person like me? Are they thinking about me? And then there's the more detached, like what I'm saying that I tend to be. Well, if that, and so I'll make the assumption sometimes if I'm until I've developed and grown, I'll make the assumption that, well, if that person has a need, they'll tell me. That's what an avoidant would do. But that's just because we're going around not too concerned with the connection breaking. We're preoccupied is watching, is that connection breaking? The avoidant is sensitive to a different thing, but we are sensitive. We're sensitive to, it's the connection breaking in a different way. It's them telling me that I did something wrong. Avoidants are really fine as long as the other person isn't upset with them. But once somebody's upset with me, then I probably go into my head and start explaining or justifying or trying to change your mind. Whereas the preoccupied person, when they're triggered, they'll be pursuing and prodding and asking questions, because we were talking about being with somebody who's different from yourself. And it's very often that the avoidant type, who's a little bit detached, and the preoccupied person, and what I was starting to say was like the avoidant, when they're triggered, they can come across defensive, and the preoccupied person, they can come across as kind of needy. Okay, those are pejorative labels,
right?
But that's, in common parlance, that's what you see. But those two kinds of people have so much to learn from each other, and they make really, really good partnerships once they learn how to do this inner work together and not blame each other. The root of most human conflict is the fear of emotional pain. And we're going to have emotional pain. It's part of life. Now, I don't mean abuse. I'm not I'm not saying, I mean, we should fear abuse or, destructive things, but
Right.
just normal things like the fear that my needs don't matter because you chose to go to bed when I wanted to stay up late and talk.
Right.
I mean, that's just the norm. That's what I'm talking. Normal
Right.
differences actually create a kind of emotional pain that we need to learn to embrace and process. So when I talk about emotional pain, I mean the pain around things like rejection, abandonment, being ignored, feeling like your needs don't matter, your voice doesn't matter, being over controlled. These are the core fears that motivate most people. Most people have unfinished childhood business because they didn't get enough love or attention to feel loved. So they're going to have a fear of not being loved, of not being good enough. There's a almost everybody has a little bit of that in their personality, and some people have it pretty well handled by adulthood, but an awful lot of us still have some unfinished childhood business.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it's the fear that old unfinished childhood pain of feeling, oh, I was standing at the school, my father was supposed to pick me up, I'm only 5 years old, and he forgot. I've actually heard stories like this, Talia.
Mm.
That's probably an innocent reason on the part of the father or
Yeah.
something. Not like he forgot he had a child, but
Right.
the little 5-year-old just remembers the terror and, gee, I can't even read yet. I don't even know where I am.
Right.
Oh, kind of thing. And so the pain of those unfinished incidents where there was pain, but you couldn't fully process the pain because you didn't have an adult that you trusted enough to hold you and let you cry and scream and maybe even get angry. Every child needs somebody that holds them while they're in pain to show them that, you can calm your nervous system fairly quickly with co-regulation. And that's one body to another body, but it's usually an adult to a child.
Mm-hmm.
So if we got co-regulation as children, we're better able to calm our triggers and calm that fear of emotional pain. Oh, I'm getting rejected, or oh, she's controlling me. That's what the triggers feel like. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
those are words that play in the mind. But if you've learned through early childhood to soothe yourself, then you'll quickly get back to calmness. The book, again, From Triggered to Tranquil. But what most of us need to do is we have to learn to calm ourselves. We need to learn to reparent ourselves. And so we start with the work, the trigger work, and I call it trigger work. It's really a form of inner self-exploration, inner healing. Starts with a frustrating event that created some kind of a feeling, a painful feeling. And you start by breathing, opening up space to let that pain be there, that pain that has to do with maybe I'm not good enough. And now I start to feel, a memory of some time when maybe something was expected of me. I'm thinking of a client that I worked with, and he was about 5 years old, and the whole family went out for ice cream, and they bought this nice ice cream cake, and they were going to bring it home to eat together. And the grandparents were there, and there were a whole family around. And for some reason, the father gives the little 5-year-old the ice cream cake to carry. And he doesn't, and so this is like his traumatic memory.
Setting him up for.
Yeah, you can feel this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, totally.
Drop the cake. And everybody, first everybody's like mad at him and disappointed. And he had no memory of this, but he was
Mm.
one of these not too feeling oriented, not too affectionate guys. But then he began to feel empathy for this little 5-year-old who
Mm.
I never asked to be carrying the ice cream cake.
Right.
So that's what I get people to do is first feel the feeling, and then sometimes memories will come that are the way that fear and that sensitivity that you're kind of running away from now in your adult relationships. I don't want to depend on anybody too much because I'll just let them down.
Hmm.
So you, you feel your own sensitivity because everybody's got something. If your adult relationship can cause a little bit of distress in your life, it can motivate you to look deeper in, and you'll find that core pain. And that is what needs healing. And how you heal it is with self-compassion. And it's like this. And so I will say to the guy, imagine that this is your much loved child, and you're holding him and just being with him and comforting him. So I'll do things like that to help activate the self-compassion. A lot of times people don't try to get agreement. They just fight over something, like, okay, if you're the guy you're the partner who has the job and I don't have a job, then you're the one who dictates whether we're going to move or not.
Right.
They don't ever have a conversation about it, though. And then the opportunity for us to move happens, and they've never talked about it, and they don't even know how to talk about it.
Mm.
It's not talking about things that really leads to deep rifts between the two people.
Yeah, and I always say that like it kind of sets a precedent of the next level of communication. Like if you don't talk about it the first time, then I think subconsciously you both go, oh, we can kind of get away with not talking about this. So we'll do it again next time. We won't talk about it again. And then you keep doing it. And then, you wake up 30 years later and you haven't talked about anything. And you've got to start all this work that you're talking about right now, 30 years later, which is, now's a better time than not
Right.
starting at all. But it's just so much more ingrained by then, isn't it?
Yeah. But now with shows like yours and books like mine, people are realizing that it's up to me to create the life that I want. And if it's two people in a couple, it's up to us to create the kind of relationship that works for us. And it requires communication
Right.
and making agreements and seeing if we're enough on the same page, like for monogamy. That's got to be talked about right away.
Right.
Are we on the same page with some of these things? If
Yeah.
we're not, can we negotiate some of these differences or move on?
I could talk to you all day as usual, but we do have to wrap up. But before we do, I want to see if you could please walk us through the 5 steps of trigger work.
Yeah. And the first half of the book is based on these 5 steps. So the first step is acceptance. Just, yep, I have triggers, and and I'm still a valid human being. And the next one is very important. The next step is knowing your own unique trigger signature. What are the things that you do when you're triggered? What are the kinds of things that trigger you? Like, is it a tone of voice, or does it always have to do with criticism? So you learn about your trigger signature so you can recognize the early warning signs and stop what you're doing, stop talking, stop thinking, racing thoughts about the other person, blaming or whatever goes on once you're triggered.
Mm-hmm.
So there's acceptance, your trigger signature. Then once you see you're triggered, learning how to pause and calm and self-soothe. So there's a lot of practices in there that help you become more resourceful. So you're actually kind of a bigger holding environment to hold more intensity. Because that's what happens with parents. They can hold a screaming child for, even maybe 5 minutes. But if it goes to 10 minutes, They can't hold it any longer. So we become better containers for emotion. And then the self-compassion is the next step, going deeper in. And I was kind of showing what that looked like. Is you start with that feeling of, oh, I dropped the ice cream cake, and then the feelings of they're disappointed with me, and you just kind of stay with the feelings until you can bring some empathy and tenderness towards yourself. And then the final step is only appropriate when you've gotten triggered with somebody else and the two of you have kind of gotten into a fight. And the last is going back and making up after the fight, and how to say you're sorry, how to say, here's what was really going on. I was triggered. I didn't mean that. What my insecure feeling and my insecure need was, I really need to feel that my voice matters, or I need your help feeling that I am good enough. So you end with a vulnerable statement to take all the blame out of it, all the finger pointing, and be soft together again. So after a trigger, you can actually get closer to a partner.
Thanks for listening to the Rebel Love Podcast, the podcast about love, sex, and relationships. If you like this episode, please support us by subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform, and find all the details of this episode and more at rebellove.com/podcast.